Okay, let's begin. This is module number 7. We're going to start our second half into the world of Windows Server. We started talking about it in the last section, and in this section, we will spend our time working in Windows Server 2016. Server 2019 is a little different, but not by that much. A lot of the concepts, a lot of the tools, and things that we'll be talking about in this second half of the class, you will find in Server 2019. I suggest using Server 2019 instead of 16. If you do not have access to Google Cloud, please let me know, and I will send you a code so that you can mess with Server 2019 in the cloud and not have to run any virtual machines locally. So the server systems, uh, they they help with centralizing and managing a infrastructure. That's what's great about them, is that is their purpose. They could work as a desktop, but that's not the point of them. Their point is really to be a centralized location and handle information. That's why they're called servers. So a computer becomes a server when it has a network service for clients. Every server has a pair with a desktop, um, and they all are backwards compatible, which is kind of crazy. Like server 16 and 19 go all can work with anything up to server 2008. So because it's a server, it doesn't have a lot of the bells and whistles that Windows 10 has, because again, it's meant to really spend its resources watching or managing services and not really uh, playing games, for example. Their server core doesn't have a GUI, but gives you a command line or PowerShell, and that's all you have to work with. There's also the Nano server, which basically strips any and all user interface together, and it's really just like an SSH system. Some of the network services that you have are listed here, but as you'll see when you work in server, you'll find a lot uh, more things that you can provide to your network. So whereas Windows 10 only does Hyper-V, a few others, Windows 10 can only handle up to 20 logged on users. All this is thrown out because server can handle a whole lot more, including things like load balancing, clusters, RAID arrays, and all that. A server role is a major function or service that a server will perform. A role service will add functions to the main role. That can get a bit confusing, but one is a role, one is a feature. Their features will provide or enhance support to an installed role. So the role is really the big thing. The the features are add-ons to those roles. Here's Server Manager, what it looks like in 2016. Again, it doesn't look that different in 2019. You can still click on Manage and hit Add Roles and Features. And you'll see the list of all the roles you can apply, along with which ones are already there. So some of the core tech, and we'll talk about this as we go through the chapters, like Server Manager, which we just saw, NTFS, which we've worked with, Active Directory, which we'll talk about, the MMC. It looks pretty much the same, functions the same, but will give you more add-ons because this is a server. You have disk management as always, your file and printer, networking, PowerShell, Hyper-V, and storage spaces. Server Manager is your main interface where you can do a lot of the server type functions. Provides you a nice summary. It's your dashboard. It's what you're always greeted with when you log in into a server for the first time, and subsequently, unless you tell it not to show up when you log in. NTFS sadly hasn't changed much since its introduction in the 1990s, but it's what Windows uses. VMMC, which we have talked about at length in Windows 10, so you are familiar with this. Disk management doesn't look that much different in server. As you can see, it looks just like it does everywhere else because all the Windows operating systems share a common core. You have file and printer sharing, which you already had in Windows 10, but server can handle many more connections at once and can do more than the desktop. Because we have a server, we really don't want to use the workgroup model. We really have the capabilities to create a domain now. So it is all centralized. That's one of the main reasons why a Windows server exists in a business, is to centralize management of the network. Of course, just like always, we have our network connections, whether it's our NIC and what protocols we're using. Don't necessarily need the other protocols, but Windows being Windows, it's backwards compatible. Now here we have all the protocols that our NIC will be able to handle. This is specifically looking at the Hyper-V network adapter. Nothing different from Windows 10. Just a weird wording, but just so you know, in Windows, the client software is client for Microsoft Networks. I don't know why it had to be that long. The server software is the file and printer sharing for Microsoft Networks. Active Directory is basically a big database that'll handle users, authentication. It'll handle adding desktops and servers into the infrastructure. It is your go-to place to manage users, groups, adding the group policies, all that kind of stuff all in one place. So of course it means this is going to be a target for attackers. So like I said, you can share across the network things like users, groups, shared printers, and so on. Authentication authorization can happen here. Kerberos can take advantage of Active Directory. Most often, we have DNS installed with Active Directory. And through there, we can assign the policies, deploy software, and assign permissions all through Active Directory. PowerShell, which you spent 2 weeks working on in Under the Wire, that's not going anywhere. If anything, it's become even more prevalent in Windows Server, especially in the cores and Nano, where you don't have any other tool to really use. It is equipped, it is there. So you will be using this throughout the course. That's why we spent 2 weeks on PowerShell. So you already had an in-depth experience into this. Hyper-V is here, since it is a Microsoft product. And Hyper-V is part of Windows Server. A lot of businesses who cannot afford VMware will use Hyper-V because it's already built in. So don't discount Hyper-V because you may end up using it more than you'll use things like VMware. Of course, we have different types of public clouds, and this is really harping to the whole cloud computing, where you could either do your computing locally or do it up on the cloud, and the different types of clouds that exist, like the public, the private, and virtual desktop. Storage spaces, a platform for creating those volumes that can be dynamically expanded in Windows. We could use RAID volumes. We could use different types like USB, SATA, SAS, internal, external. Some new features in Server 2016 that were later moved on to 19 are all of these. Like Nano server, the server that doesn't have a GUI at all. The storage spaces, nested virtualization, where you can virtualize another VM within a VM. Nano server, again, is geared towards running VMs, not intended to be a full-fledged server. Has no real user interface except for the recovery console. This little guy is meant to do just a few items, like running a application server, file server, web, DNS, and a bit of processing. This is what the console looks like. Not much to do at all. You could do containers like Docker type containers within Windows, although I've seen that it's pretty hard. It's more complicated to do it in Windows than in like Linux. We can use software-defined storage with storage spaces direct. We do storage replica to make backups of our storage in case of a disaster or in case of a failure, which, as with hardware, it's gonna happen. It's always a matter of when, not if. You can manage VMs directly from PowerShell using PowerShell Direct. And again, we're going to talk about this later. And that's the virtualization running VMs within a VM as another possibility of the servers.